Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Chen with APIAVote. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We at APIAVote, as well as the Center for Asian American Media, who was the co-producer for the API Presidential Town Hall, has learned a lot in regards to what we could do with technology, especially as we continue to look at engaging different populations with virtual town halls and meetings, and especially as we prepare our community for the upcoming elections. So with that, today we really want to create the opportunity and have the space for all of you to be able to ask questions, learn from what we've been able to observe and from our mistakes as well. We were hoping to keep the presentations pretty short and to the point and really leave a lot more time to really explore the kind of questions that you may have. Also, some of these best practices are also based on our own experiences getting on to webinars and the difficulties that we've seen individuals have and host committees and common mistakes that we've seen as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Don Young, who is with the Center for Asian American Media as their Director of Programs.
Thanks, Christine. So everybody, it's good to see you. I recognize a number of the names on the list, and I'm pretty, this is sort of the first best practices conversation that we're having, but I'm happy to be here. And I think importantly, so you see my email on the slide. I'm happy to talk because so much of the work that you do and how you design your events will be based on your priorities and what's important to you and where you are at that process. So feel free to reach out, and I'm always happy to connect you with our contacts or bounce ideas, because a lot of it is just has to be tailored according to what the work you all want to do. That said, with how much the world's changed in the last 4 or 5 months. On the one hand, it's put everything in disarray for each and every one of us. But for CAAM, it's been a really exciting time in terms of trying to pivot and figure out how to tell our stories differently, right? Briefly, for those of you who may or may not know CAAM, our work has historically been in terms of supporting filmmakers and figuring out how to assist them in terms of producing the best films that they can. And then we historically work in PBS. But these town halls have really emerged in the last 4 months as ways in which you can bring your stories, our stories, to audiences and communities through these new technologies, through Zoom in particular, and through creating live events, these town halls that are offered through Facebook Live, Instagram, YouTube. So why don't we switch to the next slide, and I can start to share some of the best practices from our experience. We are not experts, but I think there's been a lot of exciting opportunities, and in many ways, being able to jump on this quickly and develop a new way of making your stories and your organizations and your communities available to the public. We view this as a resource, and telling a story, bringing your communities to life, which is really important, right? So by no means is this definitive, but these are some learnings that we've had. Just as a context, we had this big PBS series that we always knew we were going to be launching in May, but we had to convert probably around 50 in-person events to digital events. I think we all figured out in mid-March how quickly we're going to have to change our plans. So everything was converted from in-person community-based events to digital events, right? And then the two big signature events that we were a part of was we had a big digital town hall around COVID, I think on April 29th. And then we were able to co-produce the event with Christine and APIAVote, the presidential town hall recently. So those are the two big signature events that we did, but we were also doing a lot of locally host digital events on Zoom, and then this other public media platform, OV, and we would screen clips and host locally oriented conversations, right? So some of the top end guidance that we've learned is really, look at what's out there, right? Just in the last 3 months, the platforms have really changed, right? Like for example, Zoom, they're just a lot better at hosting video now than they used to be. And everybody, like each and every one of us, unlike in March, everybody's done multiple events, right? So, but really look and see what's being done out there, whether you want to integrate clips or graphic designs into your events. We really advise that you keep your events to 1 hour, right? Really try to slot in the day and prepare for how the whole hour will break down, right? From introductions to providing data to having sections allocated for each of the priority conversations, and then always having opportunities at the end like this to have questions and answers and interaction, right? One important takeaway is allocate staffing, right? So we have a couple of consultants who have helped us who really are experienced in the platforms, whether it's Zoom or some other hosting platform, and then making sure that your platform is available to the public, either on your Facebook page, Instagram, or YouTube. You want to make sure you have technical support who work with your on-camera hosts, and then make sure that the signal that you're recording live gets to the sharing platforms, and everything is back end, because we're all producing these events virtually. It's not like hosting an event, a live event where everybody's in the same room. You just want to make sure somebody technically is hosting this, so you don't have to worry about all of the back end technical issues. And then host it, right? If it's you as organizational leaders, local news people who you like to work with, treat it like a hosted public event where somebody is able to control the flow, that you can feed moderated questions to. And then candidly, there are always technical issues that come up, right? Where a clip can't go up as quickly as you want, a PowerPoint can't go up as quickly as you want, but the host can really smooth the presentation and make it more seamless, right? That is, you really want to make sure, whether it's yourselves or a host, that they can really kind of moderate the experience so it feels really coordinated and integrated. With our 2 town halls, on our first COVID town hall, we actually got bumped from one platform to Zoom, I think 45 minutes before the event happened because a server failed. And it's fine, right? Like, you just have to make sure that you're not overseeing every little detail of what's on screen and what's happening. So you just want somebody handling the technical, and you just pivot, and you want somebody on camera who can really just have a breadth of the experience at hand, and they just smooth everything for you. They guide the event and really host the conversations, and they're able to read the room, so to speak, and just make it a fully coordinated conversation. And then, with our events, we always do technical run-throughs the day before. It's just really to make sure the cameras and microphones all look and sound good. But then also it's nice to do a run-through just so everybody's comfortable, because these events, although all of us have been participating, doing your own event, there's always just nerves and jitters, which is fine, right? So next slide, please. So lighting tips, I think, again, where people are now, it's different than where it was when we first started it. When we did our first event, end of April, for probably half of our panelists, it was their first public convening, right? Now it's just not as big an issue. Everybody knows to be well lit and to have your dedicated microphone. But, when we first did our event, I remember, like, I'm a sports fan, and with ESPN, they did this like live horse event. I don't know if people tracked it, but it was just the most terribly run event where They were getting jittery signals. You couldn't hear audio. And that's what they were feeding to the live ESPN, like broadcast signal, where we've all, we've all come to a different place, but you want to treat, I guess, point being, you want to treat the presentation as if, we're using the same tools that big corporations and television stations are using, right? So you just want to make sure what you can control in terms of lighting and sound are as good as they can be, right? And that can be addressed just simply with rehearsals and then providing like technical guides. So we're happy to share the mini PowerPoints that we use with people, but there's no reason why what we all present isn't the same quality and experience as other, still right now, everybody's still, predominantly filming from their dens or their laptops or their computers. So we want to make sure, you want to make sure that technically you're as sound as you can, and that can be addressed in a rehearsal easily. Right? Next slide, please. Same thing with camera and audio do's and don'ts. Make sure, but when you have these minute by minute schedules, and we can share some of our templates that we've used, everybody knows roughly how much time they have to prepare for, that these are host-driven conversations, and that each guest has allocated time. Typically what happens is, it'll be like this: the host will introduce, the guests will have a few minutes to introduce what they're going to cover, and then oftentimes there will be a joint question and answer or responses to audiences. But as much preparation that you could provide in terms of the flow of the event, the less likelihood there will be people stepping on each other's audio or not being ready, right? People shouldn't be surprised. And then it's a conversation with the camera. And again, so many of these can be addressed through rehearsals and through really providing a flow to the event, right? A designed experience. Next slide, please. So, again, what we find, what CAAM finds very powerful and important now is these digital town halls conversations are really a way in which you can begin to tell a story and create through new platforms a way, these are almost strategic public conversations and press conferences all into one, right? So what's great is you'll have the live experience, but these are all archived events. So, we view these as like tiered experiences. You invite press and you certainly hope they'll cover them. But if not, minimally, you're working on telling your story as an organization, introducing the public to guests or leaders or experts who are important to the work that you do. And you're building a base and an audience through these interactions. And I think even when, we all go back to, my guess is we're all going to move towards hybrid lives where I don't know that anybody's going to 5 days a week go back to office experiences. But make no mistake about it, these digital town halls, these digital conversations will become a permanent part of the work that we all do. And, you don't have to get it all right the first time. I mean, we really want to encourage and challenge folks. Treat each event as if it's the only event you're going to do, and make sure that everything's structured and timed and production quality. But then once the event's over, you reevaluate and you go at it again, right? You might want to do these quarterly. I think we're starting to figure out how to deal with NCAPA monthly press conferences up till the elections. You'll need to figure out what's good and right. I think as much as you can, you work with professional vendors to do the technical. So you just worry about, programming your event, not doing, so many times we've heard of folks doing everything, like the host is controlling the Zoom event, is telling guests what to do. As much as possible, you just want to split who's on camera versus who's technical versus who's looking out after the event flow, so to speak, right? Additionally, create a press release, announce it in the event that press are going to be interested. and then, you know, activate your networks, treat it like it's a big event, right? Promote through a press release, through social media, and, you know, in essence, build your networks and activate your networks, right? I think you just want to make sure folks understand, the public, that press understand this is part of how you'll be messaging, telling your stories to the larger public. And, you know, we never know exactly what kind of press are going to respond, but you try to strategize as best you can, and you try to envision from their perspective what would be of interest to them, right? Like, it can't just be what are the data points or the individuals they're going to meet, but you want to just try to think through the layer of what kind of press you've gotten in the past, and how might you pitch an angle that will be press friendly. You can't control the press, but you can control how you pitch to the press, right? Next slide, please. Oh, so that's all my slides. You know, again, this is for CAAM and our partners has been a really exciting time. We certainly don't have all of the answers, but I think the preparation, working with digital specialists, and really getting excited about making these kinds of digital experiences a part of the work that you could do. It's an exciting moment, and we're, you know, again, feel free to reach out to me directly. But, you know, this is a new way in which you can really celebrate the work you all do. So we're happy to talk with you more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don. I believe we're going to segue a little bit. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Robin. I am the Administrative and Development Associate here at APIAVote. And I had the privilege on working with a lot of the technical Zoom aspects for particularly our leadership summit. As Don mentioned, for the town hall, we did seek the advice and assistance of actual consultants who deal with Zoom on a regular professional basis. But I believe for the purposes of our summit, the best practices and recommendations that we collected running these workshops were very helpful, very insightful, and we're happy to share them with you today. So the topics that I will be covering specifically are meeting versus webinar, understanding the very fine separations between the two, and deciding which one would better suit the event you're planning on hosting. Then we will be segueing into setting up a Zoom live stream. There are three major components, or sorry, not components, three major options that a live stream on Zoom lets you do. We will be going over the custom live stream link for the purposes of today's tutorial, simply because I think it's the most flexible, depending on how you want to share your content with your audience base. And finally, we will be going over general setup practices. I will be going over specific Zoom setup practices, and then turning things over to Christine to discuss more of the legal C3 setup practices and setups that you should keep in mind if hosting an event. Okay, so first, meeting versus webinar. There are a lot of overlaps between the two. So for first-time users, sometimes deciding which one would be better for your event can be a little confusing. For rule of thumb, meetings are great when you expect full participation of your attendees. You really are allowing your participants to be fully engaged in the conversation. You're more or less interested in sharing your screen with your participants so that they can give input, share questions directly, as opposed to in the chat or in the Q&A section. And you can also break your participants into smaller groups so they can have further, more specified conversations. The meeting session does not allow for a practice session. Instead, you have a waiting room, as I believe you all experienced with today's call. In that case, you don't see what's currently being shared between the host and the co-host who are in the meeting prior to the event start. But you can admit people once. You can admit them manually, or you can admit them automatically once your event starts. And just for sizing purposes, a meeting can accommodate 100 to 300 participants, depending on the license that you sign up with through Zoom. On the other hand, Webinars are better if you have a larger audience and you would want them to focus more on the presenters or a panel that you've organized, as opposed to having them participate directly in the conversation. Attendees can only participate by engaging in a chat room, poll, or in the Q&A section. That can be configured in your Zoom settings when you are scheduling the event. In my personal experience, I believe webinars are a little safer in terms of security against Zoom bombers, because there are more features allocated to managing your attendees. For example, you can mute all of your attendees automatically with the click of a button, as opposed to meetings where you may or may not have to scroll through your list of participants to find the person you would like to mute. And additionally, attendees upon entry into a webinar are automatically silenced and their cameras are kept off. So you don't run the risk of somebody from your attendee list drawing attention away from any of your panelists. And once again, webinars can accommodate more people, approximately 500 to 1,000 participants, depending on which license you sign up for. Some additional details for webinar, only because I believe a lot of your events might fall under this category. With the webinar feature, you're allowed to control which speaker you would like to display at a particular time. For example, if you as the host decide to only focus on active speakers, you can set up your configuration for your webinar in that only one person will be displayed at a time, and that will be whoever is actively speaking. If you have that set up, I highly recommend having your other panelists or presenters turn off their cameras and mute themselves, because in the event perhaps background noise might happen for a panelist, or a panelist might cough by accident, the camera would automatically switch to whichever participant made that sound. So just for best practice measures, set that standard to have each participant or each panelist mute themselves and turn off their cameras before and after they complete speaking. If you would like to show a number of people, you can also set up on gallery mode. Gallery mode allows the breadth of the panelists to be displayed all at once, or 1 to 2 people. Again, falling back on the principle of, if you're planning on speaking or you would like to share your screen, please keep your cameras on and your mics on. And if you aren't a part of that conversation following after, please turn off your mics. So we've actually run into this issue with a few of our events during the Leadership Summit for APIAVote, where we were able to have a discussion between 2 panelists on a panel of approximately 6 people, simply by having them turn off their cameras and mute themselves. Just some best practice measures that we found really worked for us. And now we are going into setting up a custom live stream. And if you'll allow me for 1 second to change the screen share, I will pull up a sample webinar for everyone to view, just so we can navigate through this directly. So I believe all of you are currently looking at a test webinar. This is what you will see after you've scheduled a webinar and you go to your Zoom account that says My Webinars. If you scroll all the way to the bottom here, all the way on the far right, you see live streaming. These are the options that Zoom allows you to equip your webinar with, to share with audiences. Facebook Live, Workplace, and YouTube are standard across both Zoom Meeting and Zoom Webinar. Zoom Webinar allows for this specific feature, custom live streaming service, to be equipped, simply because, at least in our experience, Zoom Webinar happens to be a little bit more flexible with their streaming services. So custom live streaming is unique in that it allows you to set up a stream with either of these 3 options, or with any additional streaming services. For example, if you want to stream with, as Don mentioned before, a news media outlet that would like to host the event, all you need to set up this live stream is the following. So you can click Add Services to set up your custom live stream link. Please ignore these for a moment. But these are the 3 key elements that you will need to set up your live stream service. You will need your stream URL, your stream key, and your live streaming page URL. Now, if you are working with the technical support staff for whoever will be hosting your live stream, there is a very high chance they will know what these are talking about. Simply just mention these in any communication that you have, and they can send the links over. And you simply need to input them here and then hit save, and then your event will be scheduled and set to go. If you are not dealing with the technical support staff, it's very easy to find these links and elements. Just be very specific and very careful in inputting them in the correct place, because if they aren't in the correct place, there will be an issue with your streaming services. And one thing I would like to point out for the stream URL, it is very easy to identify it, because if I go out of this menu, this hyphenation down here, RTMPS, I believe, if you go to your streaming services link, that link will identify your streaming URL directly. But let me show you where, for example, you can find these elements on Facebook Live, or not Facebook Live, on Facebook. Okay, so here I am on the APIAVote Facebook page. I believe before you set up a live stream on your Facebook, please double check and make sure that you are an administrator with the correct viewing privileges for your page account, because APIAVote did run into an issue previously where we assumed that all of our staff members had the correct administrative access, but that was not the case. So we weren't able to live stream one of our summit events. This is just something you can test on your own time early before an event, as Don mentioned during your technical rehearsals. Make sure that whoever is hosting and live streaming this event has the correct specifications. So back to creating a live. This should be the first thing you see on the top. So if you click creating a live, and this is a test, so if any of you see this pop up on APIAVote's feed, we will delete this after this meeting. So please bear with us for a moment. I highly recommend scheduling a live video, even if your event is happening 20-30 minutes out. It just allows you a little bit more security in knowing that it'll be set. See, for example, here you can set the date, you can set the time. If you go through here, you can select the image. For example, we had this here with our presidential town hall. And you can set whatever time it starts. Now, whatever time you start here will be the time that the stream automatically starts if you yourself do not enable it through your webinar. So as a rule of thumb, when we were scheduling our live events for our summit, we always made sure that the live video always started 2 to 3 minutes prior to the actual event start time, just because if there was a moment where at, say, for example, 4 p.m., the live stream wasn't working, we find that out at 3:57. We have 3 to 4 minutes approximately to go into the technical side and explore what our options are to make sure that live stream is working. So I'm going to go, excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and schedule this live event. I think I have to share some of these details here. One moment, please. Schedule a live video. Okay. So now that your event has been scheduled, you can do one of two things. You can either go to upcoming live videos and events. I believe it should show your event here currently, and you can continue through editing this post. I believe it should take you to the same direction, but if not, feel free to go back to your main page, your APIAVote main page. Or you can click on the event as I just did. And as you can see here, there's a little icon at the bottom right corner of your event. If you click on this and make sure it says admin only, this verifies that you yourself have the correct credentials to launch your live stream. Okay, and as soon as you hit edit, you can see here, these are the links that you need. The server URL and the stream key, and this link over here is a live video URL, which you can input back into your event as is necessary. And a couple of things I would just like to flag before moving on. You are able to turn on your stream for your live stream up to 20 minutes prior to the scheduled event time. However, these 3 links time out 5 minutes past the start time, which is why you run the risk if you don't start your event earlier, where your link might time out and fail on you. It happened in our instances where we actually had to redo all of this link setup here 5 minutes before the event. So it is a little nerve-wracking if that happens. So the earlier you start your stream, the better. You can always pull up a screen share and have a poster of the event, for example, showing in the meantime. So we can also answer some more questions regarding that later on during the Q&A portion, but for now, that is the way in which we've set up our live streams through Facebook. Okay. And now I'm just going to segue into general setup practices. For me, these are specific Zoom setup practices because that is what I've been working with primarily over the last few weeks leading up to the Town Hall and Leadership Summit. So as mentioned before, try to coordinate your technical needs and tasks first and figure out which Zoom feature, whether it be meetings or webinar, best suit the event you're planning. You can always alter them as the planning goes on. I guess best rule of thumb in our experience is opt for whatever has the larger size unless you know that your event will be very small, closed and specific. Only because it's easier to have less people in a larger room so that you can have that extra wiggle room for accommodation rather than having a smaller Zoom setup for more people who end up registering and then they cannot get into the event. And additionally, utilize the elements that you have available to you when you set up your Zoom. For example, chat, poll, and Q&A are great ways to engage your participants during your event. I highly recommend coming up with questions or prompts ahead of time, just so that you can prompt your participants in the chat when you're scheduling your event. And as Don mentioned before, it is very helpful to have additional staff on hand who can specifically monitor these chats, both through the Zoom and also if you're streaming on Facebook Live, maybe monitoring the chat on Facebook Live, just so you make sure that most, if not all, questions are addressed and you don't really miss any conversations or important dialogue that might be beneficial to the conversation you're having in the main event. And additionally, APIAVote created a Zoom guidebook for more details on technical best practices. We can share that all with you later on. It has all of the information included in this presentation, as well as additional elements that might be helpful for you if you're thinking about pursuing an event through Zoom. And now I'm going to turn things over to Christine to discuss some more general setup tools before we go into our Q&A.
Yes, I just wanted to go ahead and highlight just a few things that as we were trying to set up and organize our workshop discussions, panel discussions, because especially when we're doing week-long event leading up to the presidential town hall and then another week long of programming afterwards, we know that people could go ahead and get tired of Zoom. But so we had to think of ways to continue to engage individuals. So here are some ideas that we were able to utilize. One is asking specific questions throughout the discussion to encourage discussion in the chat room, especially if you're using the webinar feature and you don't necessarily have the opportunity for people to just weigh in and speak up as you would in a meeting setting. Also be sure to read through the answers and highlight some of the answers that you see. If you're streaming it on Facebook Live, be sure that you have someone also reading the answers there and incorporating that into your presentation. We also use the tool Mentimeter, which is, you've seen APIAVote use this in our physical trainings last year when we would go ahead and use word clouds and have participation from the entire attendees displaying the answers that are submitted. So it's really great to be able to use this and see the answers coming in live and show this graphic design of a word cloud as it's coming in. Also, as noted, there is the polling feature that you could use in Zoom to ask questions. But these are mostly great for multiple choice answers, not necessarily just for if you're brainstorming. That's why we use the Mentimeter and the word cloud when you're going to ask for answers really submitted by the individuals. And then the other way that what we've also been trying to incorporate is that if you can identify individuals to ask a specific question directly, you could temporarily turn on their video and promote them as a panelist. So that way they are able to go ahead and ask that question directly to a panelist, and then go ahead and turn that off and actually demote them back to a regular attendee as well. Robin, if we go to the next slide, I also want to just note some key reminders because I know a number of you are looking at hosting regular candidate forums and town halls leading up to the elections. And later on this cycle, we will go ahead and do another reminder webinar on what you can and cannot do as a 501c3 and other best practices. But I just wanted to go ahead and flag these 4 best practices as you're thinking through this. 1, determine a criteria on how to select candidates to invite to participate in your forum. So that way when individuals or media and others are asking like, why were these individuals asked to participate and others were excluded, you have a specific criteria that you could go ahead and point to. Make sure that you send out the invitations at the same time to all the candidates and have that documented. And then also identify individuals and ally groups who can help you secure the candidate to participate in your forum, and make sure that you document all the follow-up as well. So that way, if there's any questions are being asked, or if you're ever being challenged in regards to how you actually did process this, you have proof and you have the ability in the history to look back at what you actually did do. So those are just some real quick things to keep in mind. And so at this particular time, I think we would like to go ahead and open it up for Q&A. You could go ahead and unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask your question. Or if you want to share a scenario in terms of what you're looking at doing. One question is like, how do you create rooms? So that is actually a setting under meetings. And then Robin, do you want to see if you could share that screenshot, or if you could share that on your...
Sorry,
or should I do that?
Muted. Sure. Give me 1 second. I think I still have the Zoom set up here, or I can just schedule a new Zoom meeting and I will share my screen momentarily.
So even like right now, I will say like, especially in a meeting opportunity, so there's 2 ways that you could go ahead and create rooms where you could go ahead and have everyone break out randomly into a number of different rooms. Also, you could go ahead and pre-select and actually upload lists in terms of how you want to divide up individuals for different types of discussions and brainstorming sessions. So I'm actually going to go ahead, Robin, while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and break people up into rooms, just so that way you could go ahead and see what that actually feels like. So there's 24 of you. I'm going to go ahead and divide you guys up into 3 rooms, and we're going to go ahead and do that automatically. So then that way you'll see eight of you guys together. So a few of you are still in the main room because you have to go ahead and accept going into your breakout room as a FYI. Well, wasn't that fun? Hopefully you guys were able to like say hi to each other. But literally, as controller of this meeting, on the bottom, just in case if we're not able to do a screenshot to you right now, but we'll do that. We'll go ahead and place that in the Zoom manual. I was literally able to just go under more on the bottom of my screen and was able to immediately break you guys up into those different rooms. I also have the capability to jump in as a host to go to different rooms to check in on each of you if I wanted to do that. Also, as you saw, I went ahead and broadcasted like a message. So, you know, during those discussions, you could give them a 5-minute warning or tell them like, hey, now we're going to shift to our second question for discussion and list what that question is. Also at the same time, if need be, I could actually move individuals that if for whatever reason I needed to move Don to another room, I could have actually moved him to one of the other ones. Robin, do you want, I'll turn it over to you. Oh, you're on mute.
I keep muting myself, my apologies. So this is your setup for a meeting. It's just an example meeting. If you scroll all the way to the bottom past audio, you will see this here, meeting options. If you click this option here, you can pre-assign the participants. So perhaps you'd want to close the registration for an event early so you can have your predetermined list of participants, and you can create rooms based on the people who've registered for this event already, or you can import from a CSV. So if you have a Google form, for example, where you want people to register for an event and you want to have them register by topic, you can export that Google form result into an Excel sheet or a CSV, and you can import it here. I don't have a sample CSV to show you, but this allows you to create up to 50 breakout rooms and assign up to 200 participants to each of those rooms. Nope, amongst those 50 rooms. My math was off. So this is how you can do it in advance. Otherwise, the method that Christine just showed you, where you can turn it on in the call, also allows you to do a random breakout room. That privilege, however, is only reserved for the host and co-hosts who are assigned by the host.
So we had another question, maybe Don, if you want to try to answer this. Are there suggestions in terms of how much time for intros and questions? How do you break up your program?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to try to think through the flow as if audiences and attendees don't know, right? So you always want to do an introduction up top, right? In terms of who's participating, the purpose of the conversation, and then also, you know, what the conversation itself will cover and the breadth of it, right? As well as the format, right? So typically, if it's an hour, we tend to break it up where 5 minutes for introductions, 10 minutes for introductions of what folks are focusing on, half hour or so in terms of the program itself, follow up, and then close out, right? It's always usually a quarter, a good half, and then close out is a good structure in terms of format.
And then I also noticed in the chat when there was discussion in regards to the meeting rooms that best practice is to go ahead and note what the question is into the chat, because people do forget. Also, if you are going to have a structured conversation, it is also recommended that you have a staff member or a individual that is actually designated for each room to ensure that the conversation is structured and flows the way that you want to actually accomplish your goals for that discussion. Another tool that we've seen used for meeting rooms is to share a Google link where individuals, if you're brainstorming, they could go ahead and type up in the Google document their responses, and then actually go ahead and process that brainstorm session in itself as well. So Robin, there's a question in regards to a poll function.
Yep. So poll function will only be enabled if you set up a poll. So for example, currently on this call, since neither myself or Christine set up a poll previously, it doesn't show up here. So if you are thinking about implementing poll, please take that into consideration when you are scheduling your event. I can show you here real quickly where it can be set up. So this is the setup page for your meeting after you've scheduled and configured everything. This is still, you can still edit this. As you see on the bottom next to your live stream option, you can click on poll. And what you can do here is add in your poll questions, type in your question, decide whether you want single choice or multiple choice. You can put additional questions as well, and then hit save. And once you save this onto your event, as soon as your event starts to launch, you should be able to enable that poll feature. I believe it is a manual thing that you have to turn on, however. So again, if you have staff on hand, put that into your schedule when you would like the poll option to be featured. Everyone should receive a little pop-up window similar to the breakout room callback, where you can answer the questions within a time frame.
So actually, I went ahead and already noted on the back end that for all my meetings that I should always have the poll feature. So I do have the capability. So I actually keep that as a standard, just so, because I'm never sure if I'm going to remember that or not. So so right now I actually can go ahead and click on the bottom of my meeting for polls and go ahead, if I wanted to go ahead and add a question with specific choices and then launch that in the middle of the conversation. So just wanted to note that. There was also a question about pricing. So this is where APIAVote can help you, because I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show the pricing that Zoom has. So here we have is that I think most folks have the basic free personal meeting, where you could host up to 100 individuals, but you do have a 40-minute limit. So I know a lot of nonprofits, because you don't want to limit yourself to 40 minutes, that they do go ahead and purchase the Pro. So for APIAVote, we did go ahead and buy the business feature with 10 hosts at $199, or essentially almost $200 a month. But that also allows us to go ahead and create our own URL, to also have a lot more features. But with that, we would also like to be able to offer that for you. So that way you don't have to pay that extra cost for some of these extra features. So if you are looking to do a town hall, if you want to just coordinate with APIAVote, I could go ahead and have you take one of our licenses and set it up for you, and then give you the login. So that way you could run your town hall, your discussion, your meeting directly utilizing one of the licenses that APIAVote has. Are there any other questions? Anyone want to also provide any insight in terms of what you guys are looking at doing? Oh, interpretations. So
I think, Christine, any insights maybe from the town hall when Joy was setting up the multiple interpretation streams?
okay, so there's a couple of things actually. There's what we actually did do for the presidential town hall, but then also in terms of Zoom, there is a feature for language interpretation. That is one that APIAVote has not necessarily tried out yet, but there is, I did play around with it before the town hall when I was trying to explore what's the best way to provide interpretation. So there is an opportunity that if you have multiple individuals watching and participating in the Zoom, you could go ahead and designate someone to actually type out in language interpretation in certain languages, and that different individuals who are participating can choose to follow that interpretation and read what is transpiring and what is being typed out in that particular language. Now for APIAVote, we did go ahead and provide interpretation services in Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, and Vietnamese for the town hall. The way we did it was that, Don, maybe you could go ahead after this, you could talk about how we did the captions for the YouTube. But we made sure that we had YouTube playing, that someone could go ahead and mute that. But then at the same time, we had 4 different Zooms for each of the different languages. And we actually pushed that out to also, was it YouTube, I believe? And so that way individuals can listen to that audio at the same time watching the actual video in itself while they muted the English version. Did I get that right, Don and Robin?
That's right, yeah. And then Zoom has features through different vendors like Caption Max that can do live captioning. This is where the technical expertise comes into play, because you have to figure out at what point the captioning goes through the signal, whether it goes on the Zoom side or the Facebook or the end destination platform. So this is where it's important to have a technical consultant who can help you figure out these options.
Let's see, launching with a virtual cocktail party for our GOTV efforts. So I think that's where, you know, you could use the Zoom rooms to like really create mixers. So, you know, typically when we're at a reception, we're going around saying hi to different individuals. So what you can do is go ahead and use Zoom. And once again, in random ways, you could go ahead and actually divide up people by 2, by 3, or 4. So that way it's almost like you're working the room and saying hi to different individuals. So that way, that's one way you can actually mix it up and make it a little bit more fun, especially if you're doing a virtual cocktail party. Obviously, there's, for APIAVote, we also created a party pack, where we went ahead and created like different materials for all ages, coloring books, different activities, materials that they could print out, banners, so that way they could post it in their room, so that way they could feel like they're also participating in this party. So, you know, really to think outside the box when you're planning for these different activities. This is where you're really stretching in terms of the icebreakers, you know, all the icebreakers we used to do physically. How are some of them can they be used virtually, right? You want to go ahead and think of those things to really change it up and try to make it more fun. We have 1 more minute left. Any one last question? Well, with that, I'd like to just thank Robin and Don for their expertise. This session has been recorded because I'm sure many of you will want to share that with your other team members, as well as when you're going through the technical aspects, probably rewatch it and pause it and try to find it yourself on your Facebook as well as Zoom settings. But, you know, we will continue to add to the Zoom manual. So if there are specific questions that you think are missing, please feel free to reach out to us so that way we could go ahead and try to provide that answer. And, you know, once again, reach out to APIAVote. We welcome you to utilize our Zoom account, so that way you do not need to pay the extra funds for the work that you want to do. And feel free to reach out if you need any other suggestions or any opportunities for us to review what you're planning, so that way we can also provide you some support on that as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.